ghosts, psychics, pendulums, curses, hexes. We welcome you here to Friday Night Dark in the realm of the night. Come join us and listen to this week's presentation, and we bid you welcome. Good evening. This is Drew, and I welcome you back to Friday Night Dark. Hey, tonight I'm going to be doing an interview with a TikTok creator who, by accident, stumbled into the paranormal. And it's by no means for me a mistake, I don't think. And I don't necessarily like to subscribe to coincidences. However, I do like the idea that there is yet another person like me who has endeavored in a place they never thought they would go and has found things along the way. Tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Etherealgoose, and I want you to join me in taking in their story and their journey, and I want you to not only welcome them in, give them a listen, give them a view, and comment. I invite you to see all the things that they have to offer that I probably wouldn't be able to do on a normal basis myself. And so I find this a great opportunity to bring in yet another person who can share with us another perspective. And now, without further ado, my interview with Ethereal Goose. This is Drew from Friday Night Dark at nighttracks.com, and I welcome you back. I have with me a special guest. That's Ethereal Goose from TikTok, and they've agreed to talk with me this evening. And so tonight I'm just going to ask a few questions here, and I want to thank you first for being here, Ethereal. Hopefully you're doing well.
I am. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to be that you're here, and thanks once again for agreeing to be with me. Let's get down to the meat of things here, as I was saying earlier, and let's see what we can get across here. I'd like to know what made you look into the paranormal initially. What got you started in that direction?
I've just, I've had my own experiences with some stuff. I had a kind of oppressive presence that followed me for years on and off, and it's really weird. I could always tell it was the same because I had the same feeling to it, like how each person has their own unique signature to how they feel when they're around you. So that's kind of what got me intrigued with all of it.
Okay, all right. Is there anything in that that time, those experiences that sticks out that would say, yeah, this is definitely a real subject for me?
I think for me, so it's weird. Most of my, there was stuff when I was awake that would happen, but there were experiences that happened when I was asleep, and we're not talking about like the sleep paralysis stuff or any of that, where it was very clear, very vivid dreams where honestly I don't feel like they were dreams. I had two separate ones where I was full-on attacked, woke up in pain.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was just really frightening experiences, and just even the subject matter of the dreams were really dark, really bleak. I remember, at one point I calling out and trying to pray in my dream and really having that voice come out of the darkness be like, your God can't help you.
Ooh, that's really dark.
So just really oppressive. It eventually went away, but I think it's because I got married to a very large, intimidating man. He's 6'8", so.
Okay.
So yeah, just one day it finally went away, but it was probably a good 10 years. It followed me around.
Wow. Was that something that ever physically confronted you when you were awake, or was it always when you were asleep? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, it would. There were times that things happened when I was awake too. Like
Oh,
I saw it a couple times, but it was. I kind of am surrounded by skeptics, so I feel like it was one thing that I couldn't really talk to a lot of people about.
yeah. It's easier to debunk certain things, and case in point, Doris Bithers back in the '70s, she had experiences with something that openly had confronted and assaulted her, and couldn't be seen. She lost her boyfriend. She was confronted by the child services back then because she had two kids. And I know that there were a lot of things that she underwent. And even the parapsychologist that actually investigated her case had doubted some of the things, but they did put a caveat in her case. And that was there were a lot of things that were done and experienced that were, for the most part, unexplained.
Right.
So I know there's truth in what can be said. I will never doubt what people say because, unfortunately, I know the paranormal is looked at from two different angles. The first is, that, you know, ghosts are real, which I'm in that category, but I also know that there could be explanations for things on the other side of it, which it doesn't lessen the experience. Actually, I think sometimes the coincidental events only underscore the significance of something because it means something to the individual versus it being something generally accepted. So I'll never discredit someone for their experience because it might mean something for them. And I think that's probably the most important part. Um, Speaking of like when you said you had gotten married, I mean, do you claim any religious persuasion for any of this, or is it just something where you're more of an agnostic on this, or how do you approach this?
Yeah, I think some religious stuff is part of why it went away. Obviously, I try to stay a little neutral on that stuff more just because I like my anonymity. But yes, I would say there was a religious element that um, was definitely a huge factor in why it went away.
Okay. All right. Um, do you only explore like structures, or do you find yourself looking at places with human activity as well? For instance, like, would you ever go to, like, say, the Union Station in Ogden, or possibly even the Rio Grande in Salt Lake City, if you had the opportunity?
No, I'd love to do both of those. I mean, the Devereaux is another one that they mention, as well as the Brigham Young Farmhouse is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been to Asylum 49.
Oh,
Um, I didn't I didn't get any energy, at least the night I was there. I feel like I pick up that stuff pretty well. I didn't get any like unusual vibes that night, so I don't know if the ghost was just taking a vacation or if they talk about that more because it helps kind of the business with the haunted house. I don't know. I do think places where you allow ghost hunts, when you're poking and prodding at that, usually you're going to invite something. So usually there is something there after, whether it was there before or not.
mm.
Uh,
Do
so
you think that some of those investigations that in the past that they were more invited there rather than their residents, or do you think it could be their residents that just don't want to talk?
I think it's probably case by case, but I think especially if you're dealing with dark stuff, if you're careful with the invitation you extend for communication, sometimes you can get someone that's claiming to be something they're not.
Okay.
So that's just my belief, and that's the stuff when people are like, "I did a Ouija board there and stuff." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. Like, you could have gotten. Hopefully, I hope for the victim's sake, they're not stuck there reliving their trauma. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's residual because I think sometimes you do get a residual imprint when horrible things have happened. Um, but yeah, I think it's just case by case for the location. I think it depends on what happened there, the significance it may have had to someone that may have died there. I think there are just a lot of factors. So I don't think it's just a you know, one answer fits every location. I think it's just a case by case.
Okay. It brings me to another question about that because um, I I know this you want to investigate stuff here in Utah, but just out of curiosity, I mean, are you a native to Utah, or is it okay to ask where you're originally from?
Oh yeah, I'm a native to Utah, so
Oh, you
a
are.
lot of
Okay.
it is, yeah. I feel like being a native to Utah, a lot of people outside of Utah probably think it's a little boring, which it can be, but that's kind of where it's fun to draw attention to some of these old sites and kind of tell the ghost stories because I feel like a lot of the ghost stories here get a little neglected. I mean, I know Ghost Adventures has been to Utah for several locations, but um, just in general, when you hear about ghost stories, you don't get a lot in Utah.
No. As a matter of fact, when I first came here, because I know I'm not native, I came here from Los Angeles initially, and I kind of fell in love with the climate and the mountains and what have you. And being someone who wanted to be outside a lot, it had its charm and appeal to me. But and I'm sure you'll understand when I say this. When I first came here, I felt this bump of energy that was not only chaotic, but it was intense. And I didn't understand what I was there. When I talked with people back in Los Angeles about it, they said, you got to be careful. And I didn't understand until I started living here exactly what they meant. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've discovered, and for me, it's been my own personal odyssey. So when I hear natives of Utah talk about it, people born and raised, if you will, it does take that turn of either that's like, whatever, or, I want to know more. And when I find people that want to know more, it's always fun to talk because then those questions come up, the areas that you go to, and so that to me is a big deal. Which brings me to another question. Have you ever seen anything where you could not explain why you were looking in these places? Anything totally odd, like how did this get up here, or how did this do that, or anything of the sort?
Um, so when I was out visiting the basin in Utah, which is like Vernal area, eastern Utah, again, it's known for a lot of weird activity. That's where you'll get a lot of the skinwalker stories because you're right near the tribal area, like the reservation,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get a lot of UFO stories. So I'm not a big UFO person. Like I should say little green men type thing. I think UFOs are probably technology we're not aware of as civilians. But
Yeah.
my husband and I totally saw a UFO out there, and you're like, okay. And I mean, honestly, it's the perfect area to test stuff because populations are so spread out in certain areas, and
Yeah.
so I would say that's probably the weirdest thing I've seen. Yeah, we were both just kind of like, huh, that's not moving like a normal like aerial vehicle. It was very,
Oh.
very fast and just like straight vertical. It was really weird, just straight up in the sky really fast.
Was it just the one incident, or I mean, did you see that
It was just
repeatedly, or?
well, I don't live out that way. We just visit. And
Okay.
so that was just the one incident. Again, it was just kind of weird but like I said, most of the weird stuff when it comes to like that area that like my husband has is skinwalkers, and then I have seen one before, which is it was unsettling, but I didn't know what it was when I saw it, and
Oh.
I described it to my husband, and he goes, "That's the exact definition of like that's the exact description of a skinwalker," and I was like, "Oh." So I'm like, I don't know if they're following him or what, but yeah. I mean, since we've been together, I've seen one lurking about.
Wow. Okay. I've heard like in Navajo lore, you're not really supposed to talk about skinwalkers only because of the fact that you're inviting one
into your life, and that's not a very good thing. And I know there's a lot of taboo around the subject, just saying it, and I forget what the proper word is in the Dene language, but I know that it was told me because I asked if I could know what the proper phrase was, and the person that told me, they're like, "Look, if we do this, I'm gonna like do all kinds of stuff to make sure that this doesn't happen again." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he says, I'm gonna need to do a cleansing, and he did a thing with sage and a feather and like in a shell cup or whatnot to make sure because he didn't want any trouble, just for me to know it. And
Yeah,
so
a lot of that.
it kind of blew me away, but he was willing, but only to a certain point. So he knew that what I was looking for was just like a definition or the word. And I wrote it down and I said I'd never forget. And here I am. I totally forgot. But maybe
So
that's to the benefit.
the Utes are not as superstitious, I should say, but the Utes and the Navajo kind of like to tick each other off. So my husband always jokes that the reason the skinwalkers are bugging him is because he's part Ute, and so they're probably just still mad at the Utes.
That
Um,
makes sense.
so he doesn't get nervous talking about it. Like I said, he's not as superstitious. I know a lot of people are superstitious talking about him. Um, I haven't found it in my personal experience when I've talked about him, even out in the area where he's had encounters. We haven't had any trouble. Um, but there are definitely certain areas uh, out near the reservation that he will not go. Even as a very superstitious person, he will not go. So,
Whoa.
like that video of me approaching near Skinwalker Ranch, he's like, "This is as far as I'll take you," and it's just and that one's actually out on the reservation. Like you're in the Fort Duchesne area, um, and yeah, like he will only go so far. But you can tell it's like you cross this threshold and you just know
Yeah,
that
there's
you're
something
kind of
there.
somewhere. Yeah, there's something there, and you got to be careful. So
When you were in Vernal and out towards like Duchesne or whatnot, did you there? I know there's a canyon with like a lot of narrow like canyon slots that you can hike through. Did you ever get a chance to go through those by chance?
are you talking about? I think it's 9 Mile Canyon that has like the petroglyphs and stuff.
There you go. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one's also private property, so you kind of have to like be careful. Like it's private property that they let people come see the petroglyphs. But we kind of saw it when we were out. The weather wasn't the greatest, so the road was sketchy.
Uh,
But I love stuff like that. So, I mean, another place I'd like to go see because they say it has, like, while we're on the subject of Native Americans, that they say just has its own energy too, is the Mountain Meadows Massacre site.
oh,
Um,
yeah.
but that one's like I'm up here in northern Utah, so it's it would be quite a drive to get to that. But there, like the Schofield mining town down there would be really cool, and that has some stories. And um, there was another, I can't think of it now. There's another place I'd like to go hit that actually had one of the like most catastrophic mining disasters. There's an explosion in 1900 and it killed 200 miners.
Oh, wait a minute. You're not talking about Lucian, are you? Lucian, Utah?
It's it's not that. It's close. I still pulled up. Let's see. But that's another one where I feel like when you just kind of have catastrophic events like that, you're gonna at the very least get something residual there. So
There was a link I found because I was doing research on Lucian, Utah, and it was an actual ghost town. The entire town was for sale.
oh
$25,000. It
really?
was yours. Yeah, lock, stock, and barrel. There, you did have one person who was a resident there. He actually built and designed some kind of like lightweight propeller, and he moved his entire business from Lucian to Long Beach. But
Oh nice.
the irony was is that he was going there to escape a whole bunch of things, and he ended up having to put himself back into the mainstream just because people didn't like going out there. But the last person I spoke to on the subject, let me know that, if you go out there, yeah, if you're able to purchase the property, it'll be a lot more now. But they also said that it has its own resources. If you're a miner, it's a great place to be. If you're not a miner, you're going to be digging a lot of rocks and you're going to be hating the land. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know.
Yeah. You get a lot of ghost towns like out in that area from the just abandoned mining towns, especially
Yes.
as you get closer to southern Utah. Yeah. So, it was Schofield. I'm trying to think of.
Okay.
Yeah, Schofield was the mining town.
Schofield? Okay.
I might have. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to write this one
But that
down.
one's cool. And the other one I've heard of that's not as well known, which this one I'm not sure why it would be haunted. When I look into the history, I'm not sure why they say it would be haunted, but it's the town of Thistle. It had one of the most catastrophic landslides, like in terms of cost of damages in U.S. history. I mean, unfortunately, I'm sure the catastrophic flooding in the like Asheville area is going to be worse now, but um, nobody died in that. From what I understand, nobody died. It was a slow enough landslide that people could evacuate, but you go there and the homes are still buried. So you just see roof tops peeking out.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was the Thistle landslide in 1983 you're talking about. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. So,
I know that there were some folks that talked about that, and a while back there was a place out where there was a mountain that literally just shifted and moved to one side, and it like buried a whole bunch of homes out there.
yeah.
And they made reference to Thistle, and they said this is just like Thistle was. I'm like, oh, what's that? So it made me look into it. Yeah, I've been wanting to look into that more, but I know I kind of run in this flow. If it keeps getting in the way, it's not meant for me to explore yet. But I know
It's
that
true.
if right now this is the second time that I've had someone actually mention that particular town, so I may start doing some
Yeah, it's
investigation.
a sign, I guess. You need to look into it.
Exactly,
But
I
yeah,
think
I
it's
need to delve
time.
through articles because I found an archive and it literally has all the publications from like the 1800s. I think it goes from 1850 up to present. And so that's where when I'm mentioning stuff in my videos, I've made sure I actually have like a resource in front of me. And people in my recent video were like, "How do you drown yourself in the Great Salt Lake?" And I'm like, "I don't know. They didn't give me a play-by-play on how they did it. They just said that, you know, two articles where somebody killed themselves in the Great Salt Lake." I get that it has, you know, a high salt content, so you're going to float. I don't know how they did it. Again, they didn't explain the methodology. It just was an article. So, so yeah, if I can't prove it, I'm not just going to
Mention it.
throw out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw out stuff that's just conjecture or just urban legend. Like I said, it makes it more fun when you can actually find proof
Yes.
that goes along with the urban legends. And that's, again, going back to like Saltaire Sally and stuff like that. Um, just where she was real, it's like, okay, then people aren't just making stuff up with that. But like when I was talking about the haunted mill and people in the comments were mentioning other deaths, and I'm like, it could very well have happened, but again, I didn't find articles, and so that's why I'm not going to mention it.
Okay.
Is I don't know if it's true or not because I can't find any evidence of that. That doesn't mean it's not true, but again, if I can't substantiate it, then I feel like I lose credibility for just talking about things that aren't true.
There herein is the rub, because I think even if you have stuff that you can show and substantiate, there's always something that might refute that evidence. And these days, even in the age of technology and information and data and whatnot, it seems easier to fabricate than it is to actually find the truth in things that are low tech, like an old time, periodical, or perhaps maybe even an archive that might have records of a certain event or what have you. It's crazy out there. There was a photograph that someone had tried to pass off and say, here is a rare photograph of Egyptians carrying a stone to the Giza pyramid. And You know, I I looked at
Just
it
a
for
grift.
it made me laugh as soon as I saw it. Like, I got a problem with this, you know. But
Well, even with the rise of spiritualism, I don't know if you heard all this stuff. I really like the podcast Lore, where they go into the actual like events that have fueled our urban legends.
hmm,
But back when spiritualism was becoming a big thing, there was actually a photographer that managed to put um, the negative of an image, like he managed to overlap images so it looked like a ghost was appearing in people's photos, and it
oh
was
yeah,
he was just a fraud. He just had figured out how to um, place that other photo into the photo, and so it's like going back to your here's the photograph of the Egyptians. People will always find a way. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They just find a way, and so you're absolutely right. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's credible. So I do the best I can, and I try to go with credible sources. Again, if I'm not mentioning stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't happen. I'm just trying to stick to the facts as I know them. So,
That to me resonates greatly because I know I made a promise to the folks that listen to my podcast. You know, hey, I'm going to make sure that there's the one side of the coin, there's the other side, and there's the third side, and that's what it is.
yeah,
And that's what resonated with me when I was kind of going through some of your videos there and whatnot. It's like, wow. So, believe you me, it was a big deal to actually sit here and have this conversation with you, if you will.
thank you.
One last question I'm probably going to put out there, and I'm just going to put it kind of something that you can poke fun at or what have you. If you had a choice to do an open investigation just by yourself or with whoever that you want to bring along, would you prefer to like hang out at Zach Bagans Museum in Las Vegas, or would you want to be in Asylum 49?
If I could pick anywhere, I think I would go to some of the ruins in Ireland, but
Okay.
just
Well,
because of the stories there. But if I
okay.
had to pick, I don't know. Zach Bagans. Here's the problematic thing with when you're doing ghost hunts for a television programming. People aren't going to tune in if you don't have some sort of evidence. So how do you know that they're not manufacturing evidence? Because you have to get viewers. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
I don't know.
I that's why I said you can poke fun at that or whatnot. I mean, the reason why I'm even bringing it up here is because, well, there's two reasons. First offhand, I know that we're still in the middle of October or towards the waning end of October, but the other part of this for me is that I find that sometimes there's always that one place you want to investigate. You mentioned Ireland. Is there any particular place there that you would want to investigate if you could?
I mean, I don't have the name off the top of my head. If we were going United States, Pennhurst would be one for sure.
Pennhurst? Okay.
Yeah. Asylums, I feel like you're always going to have stuff there just because how those patients, first of all, they were suffering with their own, struggles
Mm-hmm.
mentally, but then the way patients were treated is just awful. And so I feel like no matter what, you're going to have something there just
Yeah.
because of the awful history. But I feel like that one, I don't know that I'd go alone. I like to be a big talk, but I'm kind of a wuss.
It's okay. I mean, I managed to do Hobbs Creek and Hobbs Hollow a while back, and I had to go by myself. The person that agreed to help me, when we got there, they got so weirded out that they had to leave, literally. So I was by myself. And I let people know that no, you shouldn't go by yourself anywhere in those kind of situations. But I also let people know that I did get a couple things there. I did get confronted though by a ranger who was called out to. They not ranger. What are they? Wildlife.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
The
they.
Division of Wildlife Resources or Natural Resources, something a
There
DNR
you
cop,
go.
basically.
Exactly, yeah. And so they came out and they came and talked to me a little bit, and I let them know. I mean, I had my fishing pole out, so it wasn't like it was. Uh, wasn't doing anything. But they asked me, they said, is everything okay? There's a cougar in the area. We just want to let you know.
Yeah, that's mostly why I wouldn't go. I'm packing
exactly
the cougar, but
yeah. But I jokingly asked her, I says, hey, have you happened to see, Casper while you're out here? Is he, hunting in that direction or what have you? And they like, well, I really can't answer that question.
I'm sure they get it a lot.
They probably do, but I bring it up because in the few times and the rare times I've actually been able to do an investigation, one of the things that I found is that it's okay to be fearful, but yeah, sometimes people do get that cold feet. They don't want to go any further, and I find nothing wrong with it. I know that you're inviting in a way to get there. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I would be scared of encountering a spirit or anything. I'm more, when you don't know what's there, I don't want to encounter anything malevolent, demonic stuff. That's what I'd be worried about encountering. I think the other experiences, like I've had some where you're like, yeah, like someone's there and it's fine, like it feels fine. And so I feel like if stuff was happening around me that I couldn't explain, but it didn't have a negative feeling, I'd be fine. Be like, okay, do your thing. Like I said, I try to be respectful. When I go places, like even when I went to Hobbs Hollow, I just recorded. I didn't do any of the talking about the events until I was home.
Oh yeah.
But did you go at night?
I went late afternoon. I started at about like 5:00 in the afternoon. It was around this time of year. It was in October. And I had known that I had just like a couple of hours of daylight, and it was getting dark pretty fast. The action, if you will, didn't really start happening until around 6:30ish, because that's when the waters actually started to move, and you could see something going on.
It seems like it's a different animal at night. And again, I think it would be fun to walk at night. Most of it, as my practical brain goes, that would be really easy for a cougar to stalk you because you can't see what's going on as well as they can. And so that's mostly why I don't want to go, but I've always kind of liked seeing if there's more to it. And I believe people's comments on like stuff that's happened. I also believe that you have people that are shut off to that and nothing does happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I think COVID awakened a lot of folks just because they were home more. And I feel that a lot of the energy we're getting is probably from folks that either fell victim to that or might have just been cooped up for long enough that they had that cabin fever effect. And so between those two, you're obviously going to see more of this huge influx of like people seeing things and reporting things. And I think it's added legitimacy in some ways, but that it's also kind of it's subject to someone's perception. So obviously that means that you might not see exactly what's there or explain it right, that someone's going to say whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, when I go places, I try to go, okay, am I thinking this because I'm freaking out? I try to quiet my emotions, quiet my mind, and if stuff's still happening, you're like, okay, something else is going on. This isn't me just amping myself up. Because if I can be like, oh, I was just amped up, then I'm gonna question the credibility. But if I can, get myself to like a calm place when stuff's happened and it's still going on, you're like, yeah, there's something going on here. It's not just me, psyching myself out to experience stuff. So
yeah, I agree. It's definitely something that when you have these experiences, in some ways they lend credence to other ones who might have experiences, and hopefully somewhere in there you actually run into folks that might want to share. And that's always been one of my mantras, is that hopefully you might talk about it, but hopefully you'll talk about it with me. But one of my mission statements when I first started doing this whole thing, I want people to be able to talk about it, and so I try to create a haven, if you will. If you anyone who knows me knows that you start talking about it, I'm going to listen to you. And I always make the reference to X-Files. You know that poster that Fox Mulder had in his office?
I love that show. So.
There you go. So obviously we have commonality there already. But I want to believe, but I also understand the need to debunk. And so even when I do things as recent, like as a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a burning. It was something in remembrance of my mother who recently passed. I do this, that's okay. I thank you. But in that instance, we're burning stuff, making this fire and what have you. And my wife was there, and she wanted to take pictures, and she took one picture in particular. And in the angle you have it, you see like this wisp of smoke that's right over my shoulder, which, you would think that would be the first thing that actually caught my eye. It wasn't. There on the very top, there's an awning right there, and you can see what looks like it might be a cat, but it's because it's in black and white, I can't tell you if it is smoke or if it is a cat. But there was a cat that lived in this area that had suffered at the hands of a car, if you will, not to sound weird that way, but because of that, yeah, poor kitty. But that was the point, is that we hadn't seen it in a while, and all of a sudden there it is. And I'm like, is that the cat, or is that a different cat, or is that just smoke that looks like a cat? And I was asked about that particularly, as that, which one do you think it could be? And I'm like, I'm going to go with the tangible one, which it could be a cat that just could be right there, and it was in the picture at that moment in time, just because it's the more plausible explanation, given everything equal. Right. But I, until I can prove it, and that's the only picture I've got, it did show itself in good timing because of what we were doing, and I was looking for something, hey, Mom, show us that this is the right thing to do, and that picture jumped right out at me. So
no, that's awesome. We had something like that. It was actually in the middle of COVID. My grandmother passed away, and
sorry,
which that's all good. Thank you. I mean, it happens. Honestly, for her quality of life had gone downhill. So for her, it was probably a freeing experience, because her body and like her mind was starting to go, and her body had become a prison. And so that's no way to live. I mean, it was sad that she passed, but I think for her it wasn't the worst thing. But for a few months after, on my parents' doorbell camera, there's this orb, and it's not a bug. You can see right through it, and it came back like 3 or 4 nights, just like it was trying to go into the house. Ooh. So, and it's one that, like, again, I can't explain it. Like, there's nothing I could do to debunk it. You don't see, it's a very consistent shape. It doesn't have any movements like wings that would flutter or anything. And the entirety of the orb is see-through. And it moves. And it just floats toward their front door and then kind of disappears into the house.
Have you seen the other orb presentations I've done on TikTok? Just out of curiosity.
I'll have to look into those. But yeah, that's just one that your story kind of reminded me of, that, where it's just, I think sometimes those things happen, and it's just them providing some comfort,
Yeah.
And so I think that's cool that you got that smoke right over your shoulder.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be sharing that here in the next couple of weeks. I'm using that as the basis for explaining one of my stuff on pareidoia. So obviously this is kind of a spoiler, but maybe not, because this will probably come out like the week after.
That phenomenon in and of itself is fascinating.
It is. It brings about a lot of questions, because I know it's the very first thing that people will actually use as a form of a way to debunk something, and I find nothing wrong with it. Every investigator I've spoken to, including who I call my resident expert, they will tell you it's your duty as an investigator. You must try to debunk everything before you can say I've got no other explanation. If it can be explained in any aspect, then that needs to be considered. And then at the end of the day, if you can't explain it and people around you can't explain it, well, there you go. You've got your evidence, you've got your capture. So
I agree. So yeah, that one. There's a lot of fun topics you could touch on. With
yeah, I'm having
just
a lot
very
of fun.
phenomenal like pareidolia, or even when you get into some of the uncanny valley stuff. And
yes, it's funny you mentioned that, because I know that was part of some of the things that were brought into that picture as well. Pun intended, because we were talking about what's that movie called? The Polar Express.
Oh yeah, speaking of uncanny valley, that's like a whole movie dedicated to it.
Yeah. There are people that have told me that they actually had to tone that movie down to make it less believable, because there were kids that were getting frightened by it. And I don't know.
Yeah,
if that's
I didn't
true
feel like it was jolly or happy. I was like, I'll pass on this one. But
it blows me away, because I know that's kind of like a Christmas tradition in my household, if you will. But
I mean, it's a good book. I just can't do the movie.
Exactly. And I think that's the one thing that I found, strikingly odd is that something that's supposed to be so charming and, it's up there with me, like, Christmas Carol, which in itself is also kind of a spooky thing.
Yes.
But yeah, and yet it's a Christmas tradition that people bring in, and they invite this idea of the macabre in with something that is so religiously succinct to wholeness and to being together and what have you. So I find that weird, but yet, not surprising, I guess. I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean, I feel like it kind of makes sense. But, I mean, it's kind of like the same thing, like, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but like, why were we taking photos with our deceased loved ones, posing in these black and white photos? Like, that's macabre. And so it's like, there's just something about, like you said, inviting that into notions and traditions and all of that, that we hold dear. Like, we're all strangely drawn to it.
Well, P.T. Barnum said it best, that that we are all somehow drawn to the macabre, and we dare not look away, but we will. It for what it is. It's a draw. It brings you in to want to look at that, and it permeates in various ways, not just in traditions and holidays, but in artwork and in literature and what have you. So, I could name 1,000 authors between 19th century and now that's touched on it. So point taken, point proven. But yeah, wow. I mean, it's. I know we've completely gone way off in another direction, but it's been.
Sorry, you'll get that with me.
Well, no, I don't mind. I am that guy that I could talk for hours, and the people that do get to talk to me for hours about it will tell you that the trick isn't that I get to talking. The trick is to get me to shut up, is what they'll tell you.
I mean, when you have commonalities and topics that, especially like I said before, when you're kind of taking a more cerebral approach to all of it, like, and getting into different theories and, phenomena and stuff like that, it's really easy to branch off into interesting topics.
Yeah, no doubt it is. It's very easy. Let me ask you something, because I know I'm out of time here for what I've allotted for our conversation. Actually, we've gone way over, because I only wanted to ask you a few questions. But would you ever entertain the idea of maybe having another meetup like this at a later time, after you've looked into the, like, say, thistle or whatnot, and just rediscussing that another time?
Yeah, just hit me up whenever. We can do that. Well, yeah. I'm good with whatever.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking at it just from the terms of I like the idea of being able to talk to people. There's a lot of other folks that I talk to on a regular basis, And, I'll tell you what, we'll take that offline. And, certainly if you want to get some leads and some other folks, I talk to people both internationally as well as here in the country.
Oh, nice.
So it's fun to talk to these people and get their input and whatnot. And they have their own stuff, but we'll talk about that here. But I want to thank you once again, Ethereal,
no problem.
for being part of the show this evening. And I want to...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I definitely welcome you back. Looking forward to that. And
I am going to Moon Lake soon, so look into Moon Lake, because that one has the cryptid and the haunted campground. We are going to be hitting that.
Yes, I want to know about that.
So
it's one place I really want to go.
I'll have a video out in like 2 or 3 weeks about Moon Lake, because we're actually going to go there.
I'm so excited, really.
Yeah, we can even touch bases after Moon Lake. I'll let you know, but yeah, it's one I've never been to, and I kind of wanted to see it too because of the stories. So I'll let you know.
Okay, definitely. All right. With that, I want to say thanks once again, and I bid you good evening. And with that, this is Drew, and I'm signing off.
And with that, this concludes the interview that I had with Etherealgoose from TikTok. I encourage you to go take a look at not only their presentations of the paranormal that they kind of got into, but they also have fabulous and spectacular drone footage from all over Utah. If you get a chance, do look them up. Just type in the word ethereal when you search for them, and I guarantee you it'll be well worth the watch. This is Drew, and I bid you good night.
Thanks for listening to Friday Night Dark. Coffee is one of those items you drink in the morning. With dessert. Perhaps whenever it's late. Or maybe even when it's a long day or night. Try Coffee USA for all your coffee supplies and needs. If you follow our link down below, you can enter a code at checkout. Friday Night Dark. Then when you make your purchase, you will get an extra 10% off. Come give it a try and see for yourself. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening to us here at Nightracks.com.